My name is Colonel Amelia Brooks, and for most of my adult life, I believed I had built something real and lasting. At 42 years old, I was a highly decorated officer in the United States Army, serving as a logistics commander. I was married to Richard, a successful defense contractor, for 14 years. We lived in a beautiful home just outside of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Richard was charming and ambitious. He loved telling people how proud he was of his military wife. His mother, Evelyn, was a constant presence in our lives. She was the typical doting mother-in-law, or so I thought. She baked cookies for us, hosted family dinners, and always said how lucky Richard was to have me. Our life looked perfect from the outside. We had a lovely home, good careers, and a tight social circle within the military community. I had worked incredibly hard to reach the rank of colonel. I had deployments, commendations, and the respect of my peers. I truly believed I had a supportive husband and a loving extended family. Richard would often say, "You're the strongest woman I know, Amelia." Evelyn would nod proudly and add, "We're so lucky to have you in this family." I had no idea that the two people I trusted most were about to turn on me in the most public and humiliating way possible. I had no idea my perfect life was built on fragile lies. The warning signs started small, like cracks in a foundation I didn't notice until it was too late. Richard began coming home later from work. He was more irritable, quick to snap over small things. When I asked if everything was okay, he would sigh and say, "The company is going through some changes, Amelia. You wouldn't understand." His tone was new, condescending almost. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, also started acting strangely. She began making passive comments about how military women are so independent and how it must be hard on Richard to have a wife who's always so busy. She would say it with a sweet smile, but there was a sharpness underneath. Then came the financial inconsistencies. Money started disappearing from our joint account. When I confronted Richard, he got defensive and said I was being paranoid and controlling. He suggested I was stressed from work and should relax more. The biggest red flag came during a family dinner. Evelyn made a comment about how Richard deserved a wife who could actually be present. Richard didn't defend me. He just nodded. That night, I lay awake wondering why the two people I trusted most were suddenly making me feel like a burden. I ignored the growing unease. I told myself it was just a rough patch. Richard had always been supportive of my career. Evelyn had always been kind. I convinced myself I was overthinking, but deep down I knew something was very wrong. What I didn't know was how deep the betrayal went. The betrayal happened in the worst place possible, a courtroom, during our divorce hearing. Richard had filed for divorce 6 months earlier, claiming I was emotionally unavailable due to my military career. I was devastated, but prepared to fight fairly. What I didn't expect was the public humiliation. Evelyn took the stand as a character witness for her son. With tears in her eyes, she looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, Amelia is a cold woman. She's more married to the Army than to my son. She humiliated him for years with her absence." Richard nodded along, playing the victim. The courtroom was full of people, friends, colleagues, and strangers. I sat there in my dress uniform, feeling completely exposed and humiliated by the two people I had trusted most. When it was my turn to speak, I tried to defend myself, but Evelyn interrupted with a scoff, "See? She's always so cold and calculated." The judge called for order, but the damage was done. I felt utterly broken. The woman who once called me daughter had just publicly torn me apart to help her son take everything from me. That night, I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried harder than I had in my entire life. The two people I thought were my family had turned on me in the most painful way. But what I didn't know was that the real twist was about to come the very next morning. The days after that court hearing were some of the darkest I've ever experienced. I felt completely humiliated. The words from Evelyn and Richard played on repeat in my head. Cold, unavailable, not a real wife. The public nature of it made it even worse. People I worked with, friends in the military community, everyone had heard. I barely slept. I lost my appetite. I would sit in my apartment staring at the wall, questioning every decision I had made in my marriage and career. Had I really been a bad wife? Was my service really the problem? Richard's lawyer was aggressive, pushing for the house, most of our savings, and even trying to damage my military reputation. Evelyn continued feeding him information, trying to portray me as unstable. The isolation was crushing. Some colleagues distanced themselves. I felt like I had lost not only my marriage, but also my sense of self-worth. In my lowest moment, I sat on the floor of my living room surrounded by old photos and cried, wondering how the people I loved could turn on me so completely. I had lost my husband, my mother-in-law, my reputation, and nearly my will to keep fighting. But something inside me, the colonel who had led troops through difficult missions, refused to stay down. The next morning, I walked back into the courtroom feeling like a shell of myself. The judge entered, and everyone stood. As I rose, he looked directly at me and said with genuine respect, "Good morning, Colonel Brooks." The entire courtroom went silent. Richard and Evelyn froze. The judge continued speaking, addressing me by my rank with clear recognition. He had reviewed my full military record overnight, the commendations, the leadership awards, the classified missions I had led. But that wasn't the biggest revelation. During a recess, my lawyer pulled me aside with new documents. It turned out Richard had been using my military benefits and security clearance to secure high-level defense contracts for his company. He had been leveraging my career while complaining about it in court. Evelyn had known and encouraged it. The ultimate twist came when the judge revealed he had served with me years earlier in a joint operation. He remembered me. He knew my character. Richard's face turned ghostly white as the truth unraveled. The man who had mocked my service was actually profiting from it. For the first time since the divorce began, I felt a surge of power. They had tried to humiliate me, but they had just exposed themselves in front of a judge who knew exactly who I was. That moment in the courtroom when the judge greeted me as Colonel Brooks changed everything. The humiliation I felt began transforming into something sharper, something focused. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding myself like a military operation. I woke up early, returned to intense physical training, and met with the best military family law attorney available. Colonel Hayes, my former commander, reached out and offered to testify on my behalf. His support reminded me I wasn't fighting alone. My plan was not emotional revenge. It was strategic and professional. We gathered ironclad evidence, financial records showing Richard had been using my security clearance and military benefits to win defense contracts. Emails where Evelyn encouraged him to take advantage of Amelia's position, and proof that they had deliberately tried to damage my reputation during the divorce. I documented everything. I prepared my own testimony with calm precision. I even brought in character witnesses, fellow officers who had served with me, to speak about my integrity and leadership. Every night I would stand in front of the mirror in my dress uniform and remind myself, they tried to break Colonel Brooks. They failed. I wasn't going to destroy them out of anger. I was going to expose the truth with dignity and let the consequences do the rest. Richard and Evelyn thought they could humiliate a soldier and walk away with everything. They had no idea they had picked a fight with the wrong colonel. The final hearing day felt like the calm before a storm. Richard and Evelyn walked into the courtroom with smug confidence, still believing they had the upper hand. Evelyn even smirked at me as she took her seat. But the moment the judge entered and said, "Good morning, Colonel Brooks," their expressions changed. My lawyer presented the evidence methodically. Bank records, contracts, messages between Richard and Evelyn where they openly discussed using Amelia's position for financial gain. Character statements from 3 senior officers, including my former commander. Then I took the stand. I looked directly at Evelyn and Richard and spoke with steady, controlled emotion. "You stood in this courtroom and called me cold. You humiliated me for serving my country. You tried to destroy my reputation while secretly profiting from my rank and clearance. Today, the truth is finally here." Evelyn's face turned red. Richard looked like he wanted to disappear. The judge listened intently, his face growing more serious with every revelation. When my lawyer finished, the judge addressed Richard and Evelyn directly. He made it clear that their actions were not only unethical, but potentially illegal, especially involving misuse of military benefits. He ruled in my favor on every major point: the house, the savings, spousal support, and even recommended an investigation into Richard's business practices. As we left the courtroom, Evelyn tried to approach me, her voice trembling. "Amelia, we're still family." I stopped, looked her straight in the eyes, and said calmly, "No. You stopped being family the day you chose to humiliate me in public." Richard couldn't even look at me. The weeks after the final hearing brought a deep, quiet victory. The judge's ruling was overwhelmingly in my favor. I kept the house, received fair spousal support, and Richard was ordered to repay the money he had gained by misusing my military benefits. An investigation was opened into his company's practices. Evelyn's reputation in our social circle took a heavy hit after word of her courtroom testimony spread. For the first time in months, I could breathe. I threw myself back into my work with renewed passion and was promoted to a higher leadership position. The respect I received from my peers reminded me of my true worth. Colonel Hayes personally congratulated me and told me he was proud of how I handled everything with dignity. I sold the old house and bought a smaller, peaceful home near the base. It became my sanctuary, a place filled with my own memories, not the ghosts of betrayal. I started hosting small gatherings for fellow female officers, creating the kind of supportive sisterhood I never had with Evelyn. I'm taking things slowly with dating again. This time, I choose peace over charm and honesty over appearances. Most importantly, I've healed. I no longer carry the weight of their words. I know who I am: a strong, capable, and honorable woman. The greatest lesson this painful chapter taught me is this: never let anyone diminish your worth because they can't handle your strength. Richard and Evelyn tried to humiliate me in the most public way possible. They mocked my service, my dedication, and my character. But in the end, the truth spoke louder than their lies. To anyone going through betrayal, especially when it feels like the world is against you, hold your head high. Your value is not defined by those who try to break you. It is defined by how you rise after they do. They thought they could destroy Colonel Brooks. Instead, they only made her stronger. And that is the most satisfying victory of all.